morning to Exodus chapter 23. Father, as we look into your word this morning, I pray that you'd quicken it, make it alive to us, that your Spirit would take it and impress it upon our lives, on our life on the inside, Lord, on our hearts. And I pray, dear God, that we would be growing in grace and knowledge of you and abounding in love one to another, that our attitudes would be in line with you, that our thoughts would be in line with yours, that you would make us of one mind, one heart, and one accord. And I pray, Lord, that more and more we would be people that are coming to you and bowing our heart and our knee to you, Father, in prayer. And bring to our mind the people and the things that you want lifted up. And I bring Carol to you this morning, Carol Wolf. I pray that she would recover from the reconstructive surgery. I also pray for Nora and Christine and Chino. I pray for Eleanor. I pray for any in our congregation that are ill. I know there's some with colds. I haven't seen them today. And I just pray for healing, for comfort, for your amazing grace, for your blessing upon them. And each individual is here. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we want to start this morning. You know, I've heard quite a bit recently about people who think that the Old Testament isn't of much value anymore because we're under a new covenant, and I praise God for the new covenant. But they basically are saying to ignore the Old Testament. You know? There's not much worth or value in it. Now, I want to just say real clearly, that's wrong.
Amen.
All right? All Scripture is God-breathed. All Scripture. And when they said that, the Old Testament was basically what they had. They didn't have much of the New Testament. It was still being formed. So, and by the way, Jesus spoke the Old Testament, quoted the Old Testament. And I want to just share some things that we learned by looking at the Old Testament. Even though our covenant, our contract, if you want to call it that, with the Lord is a new one. It's a new covenant. The old covenant basically is everything from us and nothing from God. And the new covenant is everything from God and nothing from us. Of course, to abide in him. But that's not our work. So, and by the way, it doesn't mean nothing is being done through us when God's at work. That's when things are being done through us, when God is at work. So, we want to look at Exodus 23, and as we go through this, we're going to be looking at laws which no longer would apply. Well, these laws are being written for the Jewish nation, but let's look. First, verse 10. It says, "For 6 years you are to sow your fields and harvest the crops. But during the 7th year, let the land lie unplowed and unused." Now, I will stop for a moment. We're going through the same thing in the book of Ruth as we're studying it. So if you were there Wednesday night and you hear this again, that's simply because they happen to coincide. What a coincidence. So he goes on to say, let the land lie unplowed and unused in the 7th year. And then the poor among your people may get food from it. Now, when I first looked at that, I thought, well, they're going to get food from it if they didn't plow it. Well, we got a produce man here today. Chuck, you're here. Tell us about the land when you don't plant crops in it. How can you eat of its crops?
Well,
regenerates itself and becomes richer for you. So you let it rest, and you actually can grow a cover crop and turn it back into the soil, so it'll be a better producer for you in the future. And you rotate your land that way.
And so, even if you're not doing another crop on it, if you leave it just so that you don't do anything to it, it does it on its own, a certain amount. And so he says, then the poor among your people may get food from it, and the wild animals may eat what they leave. And do the same with your vineyards and with your olive grove. Now, I know there's a lot of questions that would come in their minds when they're first hearing this. They're thinking, okay, I'm with you on the 6 years. 6 years, plant and let it grow and so forth. But the 7th year, you don't plant anything, you just leave it alone. And then people invite everybody to come over and eat your produce. And let the wild animals, let them come in and eat it all. And then what are we going to do? Well, God's going to handle that. And then he goes for 6 years, and leaving the 7th year as a sabbatical year to do nothing with the land. Then he goes to speaking of days. And he says in verse 12, 6 days do your work, but on the 7th day do not work, so that your ox and your donkey may rest. And the slave or servant born in your household, male or female, and the aliens or foreigners as well, may be refreshed. So, God is saying, don't work on the 7th day and don't send your workers out. Let them rest. All the donkeys, all the cattle, all of that. Let them have a rest. And then he says, be careful to do everything. Now, be careful. Be attentive. Be considerate. Be careful to do everything I've said to you. Do not invoke the names of other gods. Do not let them be heard on your lips. Now we're going to go through that a little bit more. And I want to start by looking at the book of Leviticus in the 25th chapter, beginning in verse 1. And it's going to tell me a little bit more about this Sabbath rest kind of a thing. And I'm not going through this passage because this is my favorite passage in the Bible to teach or to read. Why am I going through it? Because I just got to it in the Word of God. Right? And the Bible says all Scripture is God-breathed. It's useful. Right? So it will be useful for you, even though you think it won't be useful for you. It will be useful for you. So here we go. And me. Leviticus 25, beginning in verse 1. This is going to give us more detail, right, on what we've been reading in Exodus 23. It says, the Lord said to Moses on Mount Sinai, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Now, do you think that God needs this for him? Is this going to help him? Is this a thing that God needs? It's like, kind of like doing our offering. I mean, I don't think it's like God saying, there's a whole lot of things I'd like to do, but I just don't have the cash. I really need you guys to bring in more offerings, and then have everybody, go back out, and put their money in the offering box and come back here and we'll sing a couple of songs and we'll count the money we got. And if we don't have enough money, then we'll sing some more songs and send you back out. I've actually been to places that do that. But God's not broke. Now, don't get me wrong. God has people, and he exhorts people to be willing to give. but it's to teach us what? To teach our children to care about one another and to give from a cheerful heart and to give willingly, to be generous rather than stingy, right? Didn't you do that with your children when you raised them? You know, remember that? You teach your children, don't be stingy, you know. Little so-and-so wants to play with the toy, let them play with the toy. It's my toy, you know. That's kind of how we are as people, right? And so God has to train us, you know. So we'll be generous with what we have. Now, you as parents may have forcibly had to take it out of your daughter or son's hands and make them do it, you know, open up. But you're hopefully working towards where they want to do it on their own. I mean, that's the deal. So, we're talking about this, but in the seventh year, the land is to have a Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Now, do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. In other words, don't let it rest and then produce on its own and then go out and grab it. That's what he's saying. Don't be stingy. Leave it alone. Hands off. Then he says, verse 6, whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, for yourself, your menservant and maidservant, and the hired worker and temporary resident who live among you, as well as for your livestock and the wild animals in your land, and whatever the land produces may be eaten. Now, he's going to talk about something called a Jubilee year. We're going to read it because this applies also too. So he says, count off 7 Sabbaths of years. Now, remember you have a Sabbath every 7, right? So, count off 7 Sabbaths of year. 7 times 7. So that the 7 Sabbaths of years amount to a period of 49 years. Then have the trumpets sounded everywhere on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the day of atonement, so the trumpet would go throughout your land. Consecrate, or set apart, the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be what's called a jubilee for you. Each one of you is to return to his family property, and each is to his own clan. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. Do not sow, do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the untended vines. For it is a jubilee, and is to be holy for you. Eat only what is taken directly from the field. In this year of Jubilee, everyone is to return to his own property. If you sell land to one of your countrymen, or buy any from him, do not take advantage of each other. You are to buy from your countrymen on the basis of the number of years since the Jubilee. Now here's the deal. God has given the Israelites a certain amount of land. Each tribe has a certain amount of land, and the people within the tribes. Now, they can sell that land, but it's not like sold for good. It's a different deal than we got going in the real estate markets today. Now, the land belongs to who? God. And so that they'll remember that. They have the land, right? They tended for God. And it's, let's just say, they're not doing well, and they decide they're going to sell their land. They've had the land for, say, 10 years, and they decide, you know what? I really need some money. I want to send the kids to school or whatever it might be. I want to sell the land. So how much land you're going to sell is 40 years worth, because you only have the land for a period of 50 years. So you've already been there 10. So when you sell it, whoever's buying it is buying 40 years worth of land. And the only reason they're buying the 40 years worth of land is because they can have crops on it during those 40 years. So it has a certain value based on the number of crop years you got, right? So they can sell it for 40 years, right? Now let's say they want to buy it back, and this person's had it for 10 years since the sale. So 10 years and 10 years is 20. So 20 from 50 is 30. So when you buy it back, you're buying it back at a price that represents 30 years left. Okay? Let's say 49 years you're going to buy, and you want to buy the land back. Okay? Then there's only 1 year left, and it's Jubilee year. Then whoever initially was the tenant or the leaseor from God gets the land back at the end of 50 years. He gives it back to him. Even if you bought it and it wasn't originally yours, God says, no, give it back. You only buy it, it's only 50-year deals. Now, we've got a family cabin in Lake Tahoe. My father-in-law and mother-in-law had bought a number of years ago, and it's kind of like that with the government. You only buy it, but you only have it for so many years, then you got to renew it. So, it says, verse 15, you are to buy from your countrymen on the basis of the number of years since the Jubilee. And he is to sell to you on the basis of the number of years left for harvesting crops. When the years are many, you are to increase the price. And when the years are few, you are to decrease the price. Because what he is really selling you is the number of crops. Do not take advantage of each other. So, don't be stingy. Don't be greedy. Do not take advantage of each other, but fear your God. I am your God. Now, follow my decrees and be careful to obey my laws, and you will live safely in the land. And then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and live there in safety. Now, you may ask, what will we eat in the 7th year if we do not plant or harvest our crops? So, if you planted crops for 6 years, in the 7th year you don't plant any, you wouldn't expect to have any crops, right? So he says, what are we going to do in the 7th year if we do not plant or harvest crops? And now here's a promise from God in verse 21. I will send you such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years. The 6th year, the 7th year, and the 8th year. And that would make sense because you're not planting anything in the 7th year, so you couldn't eat anything in the year 8. So he's going to give you enough in year 6 for all 3 of those years that you're concerned about. That the land will yield enough for 3 years. Now, while you plant during the 8th year, you will eat from the old crop and will continue to eat from it until the harvest of the 9th year comes in. The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, God says, and you are but tenants or aliens. And you are my tenants. Throughout the country that you hold as a possession, you must provide for the redemption of the land. If one of your countrymen becomes poor and sells some of his property, his nearest relative is to come and redeem what his countryman has sold. If, however, a man has no one to redeem it for him, but he himself prospers and acquires sufficient means to redeem it, he is to determine the value for the years since he sold it and refund the balance to the man to whom he sold it. He can then go back to his property, but if he does not acquire the means to repay him, what he sold will remain in possession of the buyer until the year of Jubilee. It will be returned in the Jubilee, and he can then go back to his property. So, That's a lot of detail about that, isn't it? But if you go through and you read this from now on, it shows up in different books of the Bible, then you got an idea what's going on, right? Because you went through this. So, as I started looking at this, I thought, what have you revealed here, Lord? What are some of these details teaching us that we can carry into our life? Well, let's see. It says God owns the land. Now, what would God want that land for? Because all things belong to Him. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Really, you could say, I own all the cattle on all the hills. And as Christians, you've been bought and paid for at a great price. Did you know that? You don't belong to yourself. He owns you. So how often do we consider that? We belong to Him. What would you like to do today, Lord? Anything you want to talk to me about it, Lord? I feel a little odd about what I said the other day or wherever. What do you think about it? Yeah, a little odd for you too. You know, we're checking in. Why? Because we belong to Him. It's like your kids. They've been out all day, you know, and they had to come into the house. Where you been? What have you been doing? It's not like they're just checking up on it. You want to know. You want to have a relationship with them. What have you been up to? Oh, nothing. Well, you've been gone for 4, 5, 6 hours, you know. What have you been up to? Didn't you do that with your kids when you were raised? Went to school for the first day. What's up? What's happening? Oh, nothing. But you want to have a relationship with them. You want them to open up. You know, come on, show me you got some homework? Let's take a look. What kind is it? Was that hard? Yeah? I don't know how to do that either. Why don't you show me how? See, that's conversation with our Creator, the one that owns it. Have you ever thought of having a conversation with Him like that? I think that would tickle His heart. He purchased us at a great price. Secondly, as I read this, I see attributes of His character are being revealed to us. God is a charitable God. He's generous. And He cares and respects His creation. I see Him caring about the men that don't have food, men who don't have food, about animals. He cares about all the animals He's created. Have you ever take a look at some of the strange things if you go to over at the aquarium, as an example? Have you ever taken a look at some of those fish? They're absolutely incredible. They're all different and they're all amazing, and you're going, wow, who would ever have thought of a fish looks like that? You know? I mean, they're amazing. And then animals. All the animals that God has created. And then, if that isn't mind-blowing, look at you. He's created you. God cares about all animals, and then He cares about the land. Give the land some rest. You know why? Because He's into people. See, the land produces crops. And if you keep overworking the land, it's going to lose its nutritional value. And it won't be any good for the people. And so He wants you to take care of the land. Or the people will get the nutrients that He wants them to have. Oh, well, we got this new stuff, we'll just dump that on it. You know, it'll be okay then. Well, you know, no, I don't think so. I think maybe it'd be better if we do it God's way. Give the land some rest. Well, we can't afford to give it rest. We've got to do this and do it now. See, the other thing that God is cultivating through all this is trust. He's creating trust among the people. Wow, how do we know we're going to get 3 times as much on the 6th year? I mean, He said it, but, you know, maybe that's something else in mind. You think God could pull that off? And so, we do it our way. You see, we don't stop doing it our way until we're convinced that His way is better. And this little guy had to be convinced by going through a whole lot of stuff that taught me something, and will teach these people something. It should be really clear to people without going through all this, but here it is. God is smarter than we are. That's what we go through it for, to find out that God is smarter than we are, and we're better off if we do it His way rather than our own way. And you might think, well, you're an old dude, so sure God's going to be smarter than you, because most stuff you learned, you forgot. But not me. I'm a young whippersnapper. I got it together, and I graduated from college, or I've got a master's degree, or I'm an MD, or God doesn't care about any of that. He's still smarter than you by about a bazillion. You keep saying bazillion your whole life, and that would still just begin to touch on how much smarter He is than you and me. So, He's cultivating trust. What's He doing in your life right now to cultivate trust? Are you in a place that's uncomfortable? Are you in a place that you're being stretched? And you're going, oh man, I should have zigged when I zagged way back in 48 or whatever it was. Because this couldn't be God's will. Really? How about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? How about Daniel in the lion's den? How about Joseph in prison? How about Moses at the Red Sea? Shall we go on? How about Jesus at the cross? We got this view that life is just going to unfold, and when it isn't God's perfect will, you're in the eye of the storm and nothing's touching you. Really. He's cultivating trust. And He's revealing to other nations what He's like through His people, whether it be the Israelites or Christians. See, as He's putting us through all this stuff, we're being transformed. Now, when you're being transformed, there's a couple of ways you can go through that. You can say, life is just a pit. So discouraging, so disheartening. Everything is dark and bleak, and I can't wait to get out of this stinking land. It's terrible. These people around here, they're hateful. I want out of here. We can go through that way. Or we can say, Lord, You work all things together for good. And Father, Your glory, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Everywhere you look, it's there. Lord, open my eyes to see Your glory. Open my eyes, Lord, to see Your goodness, to see Your mercy, to see You, Lord. Open my eyes every day to see it. And let me give it to all the people I run into today, Lord. Thank You for all those setups that You're bringing me. And you see people like that, they just seem to have these setups. And Lord, You're doing it for them. You're not doing it for me. All I got is rotten apples. Well, why is that? Because of the way we're thinking. It invades our spirit. And everything we look at is colored by it. Everything. And so what should we do? Change the way we're thinking. Well, you don't know what I have to deal with every day. I'm dealing with this person, and they're just an awful, terrible person. Well, it sounds a whole lot like the children of Israel. And Rephidim. Maybe we should change the way we're looking at things. That's God's way. But if you want to continue in your way, Don, or the rest of you. So He reveals Himself through His people to other nations. Who He is and what He's like. And also, God makes them tenants, not because He wants to make them slaves, but He wants them to have a stewardship. Remember when you give your children stewardship? Maybe you start out by giving them 50 cents a day, but they're gonna do something for that stewardship of that 50 cents. And you expect them to take care of it. And you give them some assignments, some things they're to do, you know. And then next day they get 50 cents also, and you add that to their bank account. What'd you do with the other 50 cents? You know, you're making them accountable, kind of a thing, because you're trying to teach them. It's not like you're putting them through torment, but you're trying to teach them something. So we learn good stewardship. And then another thing he's showing them is, remember, because he's telling them, be sure to listen to what I'm telling you, be sure to do this. He's showing them that there's blessings for obedience, and there's consequences for disobedience. That's a good thing to teach children on. There's blessings for obedience. Remember, son, when we asked you to go out and mow the lawn, and then we asked you again and again, and you kept telling us, you do it, you do it, you do it. Now you want to borrow the car? See that lawn? You want to borrow the car? And there's the lawn. Blessings for obedience, son. And consequences for disobedience. You will mow the lawn not only this week, but next week as well. That's the consequence you want. You say, oh, you're not being kind to them. No. That's how it works. Right? Now, the other thing that I saw is there's benefits in rest. And he cares for all things, and he wants you to have rest. Well, disobedience brings consequences. He gave them the Sabbath rest, but in 2 Chronicles, I want to turn there for a moment. In 2 Chronicles, chapter 36, in verse 20, it says, he, referring to King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, he carried into exile to Babylon the remnant of Israelites who escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him and his sons until the kingdom of Persia came into power. Now, this is going into the future. It hadn't happened for them yet. They're still in the desert. But there's coming a time when they're not going to obey God in the things he's asked them to do. So God's going to allow the Israelites to be taken into captivity in Babylon. Now, why am I bringing you here to this? Because something interesting happened. It says, the land enjoyed its Sabbath rest all the time of its desolation. It rested until the 70 years were completed in fulfillment of the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. So what happened is the Israelites went into Babylon and were taken captive by King Nebuchadnezzar because they were disobedient. God kept warning them and warning them and warning them, and they wouldn't listen. And they insisted not only in not doing God's will, but going just the opposite direction and doing everything just as bad as they could possibly be. And so God allowed them then to be disciplined by the Babylonians. And they kept them in captivity for 70 years. Now, coincidence, that's exactly how many years that they ignored the Sabbath rest. Coincidence or a God incident? No, a God incident. They did not keep the Sabbath rest for 70 years, and so God kept them in the box for 70 years. So the folks get thrown in jail, and you know that's exactly where God wants them to be at that moment in time. He's put them in the box. I know I've been there, been in the box. Why? Because God loved me. And sometimes people can't relate to God loved me, and so he allowed me to be put in jail. That's right. because it brought you to repentance. And that's what God has been doing. Well, not everybody goes to jail, comes to repentance. No, but hopefully what's happening is it's bringing you degree by degree a humbleness of heart and a crushed spirit. And a humble heart and a crushed spirit, God will not fail to hear that prayer of that person. And He will respond. And so God allows things in our life to take place to bring us to that place where we're ready to be helped. And the first sign of it is, oh God, get me out of this one and I'll change. Now you may sincerely think you're going to change, but you can't change on your own. And that's another step. You see, God works in processes. Not just when He comes in us, but upon us in this life. To open our eyes, to convince us and bring us to the place where we're just bankrupt. You don't get me out of this, I'm done, God. And all I want is the truth. If there's a God, I want to know you. If there's a truth, I want to follow it. I surrender. And God says, I heard that prayer. Wham! And there He is. As they say, Johnny on the spot. He's right there to work a miracle in a person's heart. Amen?
Amen.
Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for this day. Thank you for doing those things in our life and continuing to do them until you take us home. And Father, may we not give in, give up, or give out. May we just come to you and trust. And be people who are following you, and the obedience that comes from faith brings about love. And so, Father, may we grow in that love and share it with others. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. God bless you guys. Have a great day in Jesus.